social media is both our worst enemy and our greatest advocate. So we've seen how it has been mobilized as an art of protest, to talk about it, to educate people, which can be amazing and wonderful. And at the same time, it's just another avenue to sexually harass people. I think in reality, we think we've come really far as a society, and we're very quick to pat ourselves on the back and say, "How wonderful that you're having training on sexual harassment on an average Tuesday in your workplace."
I'm Shreya Parekh, and this is Empower Her, the podcast for women over 35 who want to take control of their health and wealth. Join me and my guests as we share insights, resources, and ideas to help you break free, learn more about yourself, and live your best life while closing the gender gaps. Hit follow to stay connected and sign up for free emails on the Empower Her website to supercharge your journey. Do you know your rights when it comes to handling harassment in the workplace? Today, I'm joined by Dr. Enya Doyle, a renowned advisor and advocate with nearly 15 years of experience helping values-driven companies worldwide build harassment-free, equitable environments. Specializing in anti-harassment, equity and inclusion, Dr. Doyle will share her expert insights on how your rights, the law, and the barriers to reporting harassment impact your work life and your health and financial well-being. Join us for an essential, in-depth conversation supporting your right to personally and professionally thrive. Enya, welcome to the Empower Her podcast. It's great to have you on. I am really intrigued about this conversation that we're going to be having because it's something that we haven't covered on Empower Her at all, and it is an extremely, extremely important topic. And I also feel like a lot of people don't talk about it and go deep into the conversation, and it's all to do with anti-harassment and harassment in the workplace. These kinds of things happen a lot every day. So yes, I'm really intrigued to talk about this conversation with you. So please, could you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your journey from what you were doing to what you're doing now? That would be great. Thanks so much.
That's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone listening, watching. It's great to be here. So I am Dr. Enya Doyle. I am an anti-harassment consultant, which usually brings an element of fear into any room of like, here's the fun police. I'm not the fun police. But I am a consultant. I work with companies across the UK and Ireland and further afield, talking about preventing and managing unwanted behaviour in the workplace. I specialise in gender, sex and sexuality. So sexual harassment is one of the things I talk about a lot, but it's connected to lots of other behaviours. I started doing this work when I finished my PhD in 2020. My PhD was on barriers to gender equity in classical music. So that's how I kind of get here, from the systems and structures around sexism and sexual violence, and then looking more to work with companies to prevent and to manage it. So we're thinking about prevention and management. And I think that's probably the conversation that I love having the most, is that most people, listeners, companies, HR directors, heads of inclusion, CEOs, often think about the management, the crisis response. And we're now in a period of time, particularly in the UK with the Worker Protection Act, where more companies are being alert to the fact that there are preventative measures that can be taken. So that's kind of where we're at and how we'll start this chat. But I'm really glad to be here, Shreya. Thank you for having me.
No, that's great. Thank you so much. So let's just start with addressing the question of what is anti-harassment in the workplace? What does that mean? Just for the audience to understand, because it is quite I'd say, it's quite a big term, and it can mean a lot of things to different people, and it can be misinterpreted in many different ways as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for the kind of basis of not doing an Equality Act 101, but making sure that people have the kind of main things that I tend to mention when I deliver training, there are a couple of things when it comes to harassment that you ought to know. One is unwanted behaviour. definition part one, unwanted. Lots of people, when they think that this is cancel culture gone mad, are like, okay, so I can't be in relationships. As long as you're over 18 and you both want to be part of it, absolutely fine. You carry on. No problem at all. Unwanted behavior. Then you have got the purpose or effect part. So lots of people understand harassment to be the behaviors that are intended to make you feel really crap about yourself or icky or gross, and the really overt kind of intimidation. And so there's that part of it, which is definitely covered in law. But there's the other part that we don't talk about a lot, which is the impact. So the effect, it can have the effect of making you feel that way. And when I say that way, there are a couple of factors. So there's the dignity part, which is like, you just feel like you've been violated. You just feel like your dignity has been stripped away. Intimidation, humiliation are the obvious ones. People often think of sexual harassment and they think that was intended to humiliate me, that was intended to humiliate that person. Those are obvious. And then the degrading and offensive. And that's a kind of whistle-stop tour of what the Equality Act says about harassment. And then you've got of a sexual nature. So when you come to sexual harassment versus racially aggravated harassment or even sexism, you've got the of a sexual nature, which is in many ways a really obvious thing. Talking about a person's body, talking about someone's sex life, joking about the way somebody looks, loads of compliments, showering them with compliments about their body, their hair, whatever it is, what they're wearing. And so you've got all of those sorts of things playing out in it. And some of them are really obvious of a sexual nature. And then some of it's like you walk away and you're like, was that person trying to flirt with me? Because that felt really off. So some of it's really obvious and some of it's not.
Yeah, no, definitely. There can be a lot of confusion around the term anti-harassment, harassment, and some people think, when it actually is harassment, a lot of people let that go, and we'll come into that a bit later. But
Yeah.
what are the types of harassment then that
Yeah.
you can, where you would actually call it, actually, this is harassment?
Yeah, so I talk about sexual violence on a continuum. Sexual harassment is at one end of the continuum. Sexual violence, assault, rape is here, and then femicide and people being murdered as a result of everything up to that is on the end of it. And it's important to say at this point that one of the things that we'll talk about, and one of the things I spend most of my life talking about, is that sexual assault is different. Sexual assault is further along. At the point at which someone puts an object or their hands or their body inside of your body, you are in different territory. You are in completely different legal territory. It's a completely different thing. Sexual harassment is usually verbal. I say usually because there are actions that you can do, like watching porn on your phone at work in front of people, or having T-shirts or having posters or whatever that depict those sorts of things, or that depict the definition as we go through it. A kind of unwanted behaviour is the obvious one. I don't want to see that. The way that it then plays out in terms of the effect that it has on you, whether it's intended to intimidate you or make you feel really small. But largely it's verbal, and that is comments, that is jokes. I think one of the things that I find when I talk to people about what sexual harassment is, they're like, I don't think I would have called that sexual harassment when that person was just joking about my sex life, or that person was just joking about my body, or making a comment about the clothes that I was wearing and them being see-through, for example. Like, is that sexual harassment? Like, we have kind of made it so taboo to talk about sex and to talk about bodies and to talk about ourselves as sexual beings in an empowering way, or just even in an educational way, that when it comes to sexual harassment, we're like, oh no, it has to be much more serious than the casual water cooler comments or the comments on Teams meetings that just feel a bit off. And we describe them as icky, or we describe them as my kind of least favorite word, which is inappropriate. And it's not inappropriate. That's not inappropriate. you mean illegal. Like there's inappropriate, which is we think about it in the context of cultural, whatever you say you think inappropriate is, and whatever I say I think inappropriate is. They could be two different things, but the law is abundantly clear, and we use inappropriate as one of those words to make it seem less important.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see where you're in a situation, whether that's at work or, on the street, wherever, and you just, a lot of the time, people excuse other people's
Yeah.
speech or way of acting by saying, oh, that's not that bad,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. And in actual form, it is harassment,
Mm-hmm.
but people think harassment is quite serious,
Mm-hmm.
like as in like really serious and
Yeah.
like almost kind of breaking the law, doing a serious act, whether that's verbal or physical.
Yeah.
And the stuff in between gets lost.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why it's really important to be clear, know when someone does make a comment about you, whether that's to do with your race, the way you're dressed, or whatever, that is actually harassment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of classifying it as harassment, is it an ongoing thing, or could it be just a one-off comment?
So one-off comments can be just as bad, and I think anyone who is listening to this that's like now like, oh, so if I classify all of those behaviors as harassment, I've got the I've got the elements of, for some people it's a building thing, and maybe
Yeah.
the comments get just slightly more scandalous every time, or maybe there's just a repeated, like, compliments is probably the key example where people, when I speak to them, are like, can't give people compliments anymore. Like, that's not exactly what we're saying here. But if you, for example, every Monday you walk into work and there's a person on the desk, irrespective of their sexual orientation, irrespective of their gender identity, and irrespective of your sexual orientation and your gender identity, that person just persistently talks about the way that your bum looks. And it's the first thing that happens to you when you get into work on a Monday morning and someone just says, I just really love the way your bum looks in suits. Irrespective of whether you're a bloke, whether you're a woman, whether you're non-binary, if someone is to make that comment persistently, you might be like the first time, that was a bit weird, but well intended. The second time, you're like, okay, no, this is just about my bum. Like, you are just here to talk to me about my bum. Okay, cool. That's good to know. And for some people, the first comment would be, you've crossed the line. Completely 100% crossed the line. And maybe the second time you're like, okay, now I'm going to report you to HR because this is weird. The other element of this that's important to consider is the power dynamics in these spaces. So we see a lot of research around interns, and how they're treated in comparison to senior leaders, which isn't to say that senior leaders don't experience sexual harassment, but we certainly see the prevalence amongst the 18 to 25-year-olds, for example, is much higher, is 13% higher than the average for women. So thinking about the power dynamics of who's saying those comments, who's making those comments, when those comments are being made, and who they're being made by, that also adds into the kind of, it makes it more relevant. It's not that you can only be sexually harassed by someone that's in a position of power or authority over you, but again, thinking of the context of whether it's once or whether it's otherwise, the relationship between you and senior people in your company is also really important to consider in terms of how close the line is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, it could be male, female, whether you're non-binary or in any of those situations. Now, do I don't want to kind of put you on the spot in terms of
So,
stats and things, but you may know, and you probably do know, what are the stats in terms of, men and women reporting and or even I guess you can't capture stats if they're not reporting, but
yeah.
if they are reporting, would it be true in saying that women are more harassed than men in terms of statistics, that what's been actually reported?
Yeah, so I think there's a caveat that you're trying to get at there, Shreya, which is that it's very underreported. So the numbers that we do have, yes, definitely do tell that story that that women are far more likely to experience sexual harassment. The statistics that we're working on at the minute estimate somewhere between 50 and 55% of women have been sexually harassed. The reports on men are around 20% of men. Now, whether that is that's quite low. It seems quite high when you think of what we've been taught, what we know, what we've absorbed from the press and the media about who receives sexual harassment. 20% actually seems like a really high number. In reality, it's probably higher because if you think about the barriers to reporting sexual harassment as a man is one of those things that when we talk about men's mental health, then you get into like, well, I'm not going to report that because it's something that happens to women. Then if you kind of, seeing as you asked for the statistics, LGBT people is 1 in 5, 18% of LGBT people, and actually that's more on the sexuality basis. Trans people is around 35% of trans people reporting that they have been sexually harassed. And then you enter into the kind of intersectional space. So I've already said 18 to 25-year-olds are 10 to 13% more likely to experience sexual harassment or to report it. Don't know. I think the survey says on that one's probably still out. But then you add in disabled people are twice more likely to be sexually harassed, and women from minoritized ethnic backgrounds are 10% more likely to be sexually harassed. So you add in all of these kind of intersectional barriers to it, and it would be fair to say that it's happening everywhere and to everyone. No one is immune from it. No one is kind of being left out of the conversation about it. But certainly the way that we discuss it, I think the Me Too movement, 2016 was definitely a change in the tide, but it was rightly held accountable to how white it was, and it was white middle class women who were being talked about, and it was men in very obvious and very clear positions of authority that were being reckless with their power and authority. And now we're more in a space where we know and we recognise that it's happening to everyone and it happens everywhere. It's not just on the street, it's not just in Hollywood, it's absolutely everywhere, and it's happening to greater or lesser degrees to everyone.
Yeah. Can I dive into a little bit about, are there any indications to why this is happening? Obviously, I'm not saying it's a new thing. It's been going on for centuries, okay? Which is obvious, but yes, there's more reporting, people, with the Me Too movement, and it's coming out into the public domain now a lot more. So obviously there's a lot more awareness on it. But is there a pattern in the sense of why are people getting harassed, especially sexual harassment towards women? Are there any kind of, is there any information around or facts around what's causing these things to happen to women?
I think the reality is that as we consider ourselves to become more progressive as a society, the chasm has kind of gone even further away from the realities and expectations of who we are as humans and how we interact and engage with each other. I think, as you say, it's been happening a lot of the time. I think one of the things that's really interesting about talking about this in 2024 is that social media is both our worst enemy and our greatest advocate. So we've seen how it has been mobilized as an art of protest, to talk about it, to educate people, which can be amazing and wonderful. And at the same time, it's just another avenue to sexually harass people. The levels of anonymity, the lack of accountability. I think as we continue as a society to continue to have the same lack of accountability that if we talk about the people that have received all of this kind of public press recently, Mohammed Al Fayed, P. Diddy, etc., a lot of their the stuff that has been talked about with regards to them, Harvey Weinstein, it's the 1980s and 90s, and people very easily then dismiss that as like, oh, that was ages ago. That doesn't happen anymore. And I think our apathy to curiosity about people's experiences, our apathy towards kind of collegiality and teamwork and being allies to each other, or bystanders that are active and upstanding in the workplace. I think in reality, we think we've come really far as a society, and we're very quick to pat ourselves on the back and say, "No, wonderful that you're having training on sexual harassment on an average Tuesday in your workplace." But the reality is that for most people, like if we think about the rise of incel culture, we think of the rise of kind of male violence against women and girls in the police, and even the murder of Sarah Everard in 2021, and all of the stories that came out after that about how it's prevalent, sexual violence, sexual harassment is prevalent amongst the police, who are supposed to keep us safe from sexual violence and sexual harassment, or to manage it well. We're in a place now where we now know, as a society, men in particular know that they're more likely to get away with it, that they're not very likely to be prosecuted for rape, that the CPS are unlikely to take it up, that when it comes to HR, the reality is that it's probably a he said, she said situation. There won't be enough evidence to uphold it, and therefore I'll probably get away with it. We've done a lot of talking about being a progressive society, but we haven't done an awful lot of practical steps to hold people accountable to their actions. And now people, whether they know it or not, are more aware that they're going to get away with it.
Yeah, and this is the most frustrating thing, and probably why a lot of people don't report, because going through the process of reporting can be quite traumatic. That's the first thing, okay? And then not having the support of HR or the people around you, even the law might not support you. It's a case of, do I really want to go down that road? It's fine, I'll just deal with it. And this is then where, the reason why, one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast, people might be thinking, what's this got to do with health and wealth, Shreya? But actually it has a huge amount to do with health, huge amount to do with your mental and physical health. Because if you are going through any of this, it will have an impact on your mental and physical health, no doubt about it. So I want to kind of dive into the barriers to reporting, because if we're not reporting, why aren't we reporting? What are the barriers, and what can people do if they are being harassed in any way, shape or form?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of barriers, I think there are a couple of real key ones. One is a societal kind of expectation. Whether or not your HR team are trained and recently trained and retrained on how to deal with workplace investigations of this kind of nature, whether they are trained to think about the timeliness of the report, whether they're talking about you as a reporter or as a victim, whether they're asking you how you'd like to be referred to, whether they're talking about it as an allegation or just as a report, and all of the inflammatory language that we tend to use. Whether there's a policy in place, like you go to HR and you're not even sure what you're expecting them to do, you just know that you should go to HR. And then you're kind of treated like either you know more than they do, or they say, have you got evidence? Have you got proof? They don't seem to give you the time of day, and you go, I don't know. Like, I have no idea what I'm even expecting from you. And then the case may be that you just don't report it. I think most people don't report it because they're afraid, rightly or wrongly, of how long it's going to take, how much of an impact it's going to have on the rest of their work life, whether that's reporting it to the police or reporting it to internally to HR or to your line manager. the kind of time that it's going to take up of your brain space when you've got projects that you need to deliver and you've got work that needs to be done and you've got people that you need to line manage and be in a mental space to be able to do that. So I often talk to HR teams about the time of day that you have these conversations. Like, don't have this conversation at 8 a.m. with someone, even if it's the only time that they can do. They then have to do the rest of their workday knowing that it started with conversation with you about sexual harassment. And that also applies to the person who's been reported, irrespective of whether they actually did it or it can be proven that they did it. You've still taken them out at the start of their workday. I've seen similar conversations around racism, and having those conversations in the middle of a workday and then being like, enjoy the rest of your day, that'll be nice. So I think a lot of those are barriers. Some of them are real and some of them are kind of made to feel more scary. I think we've done a really good job of making harassment feel like a really scary thing, as you said at the start. But I often, when I deliver training, talking about the impact that it has, and you're right, what's this got to do with your podcast? It's got everything to do with your podcast in terms of mental and physical health. Thinking about it in that context, thinking about the mental aspect, thinking about the physical aspect, thinking about how that all plays out. I think a lot of people are afraid of how heavy it is, afraid of how heavy it is to go in and to accuse someone. And again, there's inflammatory language all around, right? Like the accusation. I often say in training, when we're thinking about the impact, put yourself first. Don't worry about the prevention of this for other people. Loads of women in particular, when I deliver training, will say to me, you know, this is about preventing it for other people. This is about other people getting the courage to come out, or this person not having the ability to do that a lot. We've seen that. I watched the BBC News when they interviewed some of the people that have been assaulted by Mohammed Al-Fayed, and they, you know, they're doing really wonderful stuff, wavering their anonymity and that sort of thing, which is amazing and so courageous.
Yeah.
But one of the messages that kind of sits underneath that is that we owe it to each other, to report it. I owe it to my colleague to report this because it could happen to them. And I often say, that's a really wonderful thing. And if that makes you want to report it, then that is marvelous. But you absolutely do not need to report so that it doesn't happen to other people. That person, the harasser, is not your responsibility. Report it for you. If there happen to be positive consequences for everybody else, that's grand. The kind of communal responsibility of that doesn't sit with the person that has been harassed. And I think that's one of the main kind of pieces of baggage that people who've been harassed carry with them, is the burden of prevention for everyone, when in reality there are 1,000 other opportunities that this could have been prevented, and it's not your responsibility.
Yeah, so, you know, look, I feel like quite a few people have this kind of negative view of HR departments when it comes to things like this, because I haven't personally experienced anything, but I have heard a lot of stories from not just women, you know, men as well, where they're being harassed in some shape or form. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual harassment, could be just, you know, bullied, like picked on for whatever reason. Okay, and they're scared to report or go to HR because they feel like HR are there to protect the company, not the employee, because they need to make sure that the company doesn't have bad press, doesn't have, you know, bad publicity, and ultimately, in my view, that's what I feel a lot of people are thinking and going through. I mean, I'm hoping a lot of people might DM me and say, no, Shreya, that's not true. You know, we have 100% faith in our HR department that they will protect us fully. And if you do feel like that, please come and tell me, because that's great as well. It's great to know those kind of companies as well. But in my view, I feel like a lot of companies don't portray that to their employees, and there are a lot of scared and vulnerable employees out there not reporting things because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, like I often say to HR teams, and to legal counsel and to CEOs, PR can be one of the reasons that you choose to take this work seriously. Like that is a very valid part of a lot of the work that you do, but it can't be the only reason that you do this work. And if it is the only reason you do this work, your employees, your key stakeholders will see through it. They will know that the only reason you're doing this is for PR. You can do it for PR and also for other reasons, but you have to fundamentally do it for people. Like, you are a business that has people in it, like all businesses. Your business would not exist if people weren't there. So prioritize their workplace safety in the same way that we prioritize health and safety, in the same way that you prioritize other things. I think one of the kind of common things that comes up for me in this is the difference between if you worked in, say you worked in a store or something that sells confectionery or similar, whether that's a theatre, whether that's a shop, whether that's a warehouse, you're more likely to get fired for stealing a chocolate bar than you are for sexually harassing your colleagues. When we think about that with HR, that tends to be like, oh yeah, okay, that's why they don't trust us. That's why they're not coming, because they know that if I report that Shreya stole a chocolate bar, to the best of my knowledge, Shreya's never stole a chocolate bar from any of her previous employers. But you're more likely to be fired for doing that.
Yeah.
You're more likely to be put on review for doing that. There are more likely to be consequences for you doing that. And in reality, that then connects. And for companies that aren't, again, the PR reason is one, the business case, the financial kind of cost, tribunals, legal fees, all of those sorts of things. The cost of an employee stealing a chocolate bar, stealing a product from you, is whatever the cost of that product is. Yes, you're probably preventing them stealing other products down the line, but the cost of prevention of sexual harassment, or the cost of you getting rid of someone who sexually harassed your colleague, I would argue it's not difficult financially, fiscally, or morally to argue that firing someone who has been sexually harassing colleagues when they've been given all of the information to know that that's not correct, it's in your policies, etc. Like, obviously, no, but similarly, we see in lots of companies that you are far more likely to get fired for stealing a chocolate bar than you are to be fired for sexually harassing someone. And if HR want to consider, there are people listening to this that are in senior leadership, that's the question to bring to the next meeting, is are we more likely to fire someone for stealing from the company or for sexually harassing someone? And why is that? What is our justification for the chocolate bar?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the whole thing about the legal costs as well, right? It's a complete, I don't know. I guess the question for you I would want to ask is, what would be the process if someone is being harassed in the workplace in whatever shape or form? Again, okay, it could be just like those comments that you said, I don't know, oh, your hair looks horrid today, and you don't look very nice today, or so, I don't know, those kinds of things,
Yeah.
even if they're like microaggressions, whatever it is. Okay, what would be the starting point? Now, I am feeling like crap. I want to do something about it, but I'm scared because I'm scared I'll lose my job. I'm scared that what people will think of me in the company. I'm scared about a lot of things. Go.
Yeah. So I think the starting point again is protecting your mental health in the first instance. So you don't have to run straight into reporting this to HR. A lot of people feel like if you don't report it as soon as it happens, then you lose the chance to report it. That's certainly not true. That's not the case. Certainly from my end, you can always report it. There are legal thresholds down the line, but I would say don't worry about those because you're probably not anywhere near them. So thinking about when you report, what you report, and who you report it to. Timeline doesn't matter. Who you report it to is probably one of the most interesting kind of questions in this. And people always, when I ask this question in training, People will say HR, or they'll say my line manager. And I'm like, okay, leave both of those answers for a minute. And instead, I want you to think of someone that you trust in the company. Somebody that you trust. It could be that that person is your line manager. It could be that that person is in HR. That's totally fine. But who is that person? What is their name? You don't have to tell me, but what is the name of that person? And if you're listening to this thinking, maybe I should report this behavior, who is that person? Think of their name, think of their face, the person that you trust, that you think, I'm gonna temperature check this. I'm gonna ask them if they come with me to HR. I'm gonna ask them if they think that I'm being too sensitive, or all of the kind of criticisms that we assume that people are going to make of us when we say these things. Who is the person you trust? And speak to them first. I generally don't advise that you share it with loads of people in-house. Sides being taken is one of the most horrible kind of consequences of people finding out that you're reporting any form of unwanted behaviour in the workplace, is that everyone has an opinion. He's not like that. She wouldn't say that. I've never seen them do that. And that's just horrid. So find one person and be clear with them that, you don't know what you want to do, but you'd be really grateful if they didn't share it with anyone else. Similarly, you don't have to share it in-house yet. You can choose friend, partner, family member. There are also loads of helplines that you can speak to. You can obviously speak to ACAS, as you can whenever. Companies like Rape Crisis, you can get support and help, and they can just help you think through some of your options. And then if you then choose to go back in-house and report it to HR, the main advice is to not tell everyone on the way up. If you can and do feel empowered to go straight to the top, then saying to HR, I've got something I want to share with you. And being aware that at that point, with everyone up to HR, no one has to be judge, jury, and executioner. If you are someone that someone reports it to and you're not in a position to investigate it, you can just say, thank you for telling me. You don't have to say, he's not like that, she wouldn't say that, they'd never do that. You can just say, I'm really glad you told me. Particularly thinking of line managers, if you're not going to be investigating it, which you're not because you're part of the evidence trail, you're not going to be investigating it, you can just say, thank you for telling me. Then when you go to HR will hopefully inform you, will tell you what the process is. With any luck and a good bit of consultancy, that will be in a process sheet that will be attached to a policy that is actually followed consistently. So they should be able to explain to you what would happen in terms of timelines, in terms of what will happen, who will be interviewed, whether there's evidence, how that will be reviewed, who it's going to be done by, when you'll hear an outcome, what the outcomes are. I think that's one of the things that people tend to really struggle with, is an HR investigation not being upheld doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means there wasn't enough evidence given to HR in that moment at that time for it to be upheld. And I think that's a lot of the fear around myths around sexual harassment, is I wasn't believed, is very different to we didn't have enough evidence. And HR can and should feel able to say, I'm really sorry that you're feeling so bad and that the impact on your mental health is so rubbish. With the evidence that you've been able to give to us, with the CCTV, with the audio recording, with the recording of the Teams meeting, with the AI transcript of that meeting, whatever it is, we weren't able to get that information. We weren't able, the other person denies that they said it, denies that that interaction ever happened, there were no witnesses, blah, 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 blah. So being clear and making sure that you've got clarity from HR if they don't offer that up, saying, what are the timelines, who's going to be investigating this, how long will it take, how much time is it likely to take out of my day, how will I be supported during this process, do I get a person that will help me through this, can I bring a legal representative, should I bring a legal representative, should I bring a union rep, seek clarity at any point. And also the final thing is you can withdraw that complaint anytime you like. So if it feels like it's too horrible and you want to put it on pause, put it on pause. You don't have to go through with it just because you started it. I think a lot of people feel like it's a stone rolling down the hill, and once you've started it, that's you until it's finished. You can take, and you should feel able to, and HR should enable you to prioritize yourself.
Yeah. I think the key thing is, the evidence. It can be really difficult if you don't have any evidence, and people are clever in the way they harass. If I'm on my own at my desk and they just walk past and say some things to me, or do some things to me, how can I provide that evidence? And if you don't have evidence, what are your options really? Because that's a scary thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are two things that I would say. One is you should still report it, even if you think it might not be upheld, because you shouldn't predict your own future. That's one. Is even if you don't think there's evidence, you don't know what other information HR have about that particular person and about how that person does those things. So it may be that you are the final piece of a jigsaw puzzle and HR have been investigating but unable to build a full picture of that person for years. And they've been unable. And actually, if you say, this happened and it happened in this way, and HR have 7 or 8 other reports of this happened and it happened in this way against that person, then HR don't have to prove conclusively that it happened. There's a very key caveat, which is the reasonability. Did it reasonably happen? Is it reasonable that that happened? And so when you add in the kind of the reports that don't seem worth reporting, when you add those into the HR picture, and then HR get a picture of, yeah, probably is fairly reasonable for us to conclude with the information that we have from this person that did happen. It doesn't have to be 100% fail-safe proof. That's what, if you think about all of the programs that you've ever watched, including Lawyers in the UK and or in America, and America is a different legal system and has different burdens of proof. But a lot of, like, the CPS doesn't take up these cases because they absolutely 100% happened. They take up these cases because there's a reasonable probability that it can be prosecuted, right? That's why it happens. It's just that it's reasonable. So I would say to people, don't presume. Don't presume that you will be, that it will go one way or the other. Just give the information, give the facts. Similarly, if you witness harassment, just give the facts. And if you witness harassment, that is the best thing that you can do, is go straight to HR and say, I was in a Zoom meeting earlier and this person said this to this person. I don't know the context of the conversation. I don't know the context of their relationship. I don't know either of them well enough. But here are the facts. The Zoom call was at 10 o'clock. There were 7 people on the Zoom call. Here are the people that were on the Zoom call. I haven't spoken to any of them about it. This is what was said. And then the person turned the camera off soon after, or whatever, the person looked embarrassed, whatever it is. You can give kind of factual-based statements instead of opinion-based statements. So opinion-based statements is the person looked embarrassed. Facts-based statements is their face went bright red, they put their hand over their mouth, they turned their camera off. So sticking with facts, and then let someone else investigate it. You don't have to come with a preconceived idea of whether it was harassment, and you also don't have to say, I think it was sexual harassment. You can just describe the behavior.
Yeah. So how can, coming from a HR perspective now, I don't think people trust HR departments. I think there's a massive trust issue with HR departments, and that's why there are probably millions of cases that go unreported. What can HR departments or HR, employees do to make their employees, the people working for that organization, feel comfortable and feel like that they should be absolutely be able to report any form of harassment? Because I think it's on them.
Absolutely.
If things are going unreported, it's down to the company and the HR department. It's actually, I don't know whether I should go as far as accusing them, but I feel like it's their fault that people aren't reporting. not just their fault. Obviously, it's the environment around you and
Yeah.
perceptions, how people make you feel through social media. You know, watching things on TV and the media,
Yeah.
things being reported and people aren't being prosecuted, like
Yeah.
we mentioned earlier. So there's that fear as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so what can companies and HR departments do?
I think trust is the main word, and trust is thrown around very casually in the workplace. But trust is a two-way system, and oftentimes senior leaders throw down culture and expect it to stick. So throw down a policy and then say, "Hurrah, we've got a policy," or throw down 30-minute training or 60-minute training annually, or maybe not even annually, and then expect it to stick. So I think the trust element is built through repeated, consistent actions. So it's through your policies and then how they play out. It's through the transparency of reporting and what happens when I report. You don't have to give me the names, but I'd like to know how many cases HR have investigated and whether the outcomes have been the case. Now, obviously, I work with companies of varying sizes, and there are various kind of places where 5 is a number that kind of gives anonymity, for example. So if you've got fewer than 5, then you probably don't want to talk about it because people will know who those people are.
Yeah.
But certainly being transparent with the information that you can be transparent about, and then integrating it into every conversation. So whether it's to do with physical health, whether it's in your health policies, connecting stress and burnout, anxiety and anger. And when you talk about all of those things, acknowledging that it's connected to this. Similarly, when you're talking about mental health and well-being, are you talking about the systems that cause poor mental health in the workplace? So connecting it to those things, connecting it to your general inclusion practices, not just talking about sexism as though there are no consequences of sexism, as though it's not a continuum that then leads on to sexual assault and on to femicide. You need to talk about the whole thing. And I would say to HR generalists, and I think this is probably where we expect a lot of HR teams, you don't have enough hours in the day to be an expert in this. You never set out to be an expert in this. You're perhaps a payroll expert who got promoted to head of HR, and here you are, and you're doing wonderful things and you've got the right intentions. Get someone else in to help you. Get external advice, get external people to come in. I audit company culture and give recommendations. You don't have to pay to have me on retainer, but you could have an actual idea of where you're going wrong and what to do next. But you've also got the opportunity to do that in-house. We go back to trust, two-way street conversation. When was the last time you had a conversation with your employees about why they don't report? If you take the assumption that it happens everywhere and that it can be happening here, it most likely is happening here. If you as a HR department take that approach, that it happens here, then you're asking, why are you not reporting? What would be the hypothetical barriers to you, Shreya? I'm asking as HR, reporting. And they say, well, I don't know what my barriers would be, but I can think, I don't know where the policy is. Do we have a policy? I can think, I don't know what you would say. I don't know how many people would be told. Would my line manager have to be told? If you ended up firing that person, what reasons would you give to the rest of the company as to why you've parted ways? Like, I've got FAQs. Like, could you create an FAQ document, like, as a result of the conversations that you have with your colleagues, and ask them where they think it happens? I think probably one of the greatest things that HR teams can do is implement anonymous reporting, because that takes away the barriers of having to name people that are important or in power. And it also gives HR better systems. Where does it happen? Where is it more likely to happen? What time of day does it happen? And then you can create protections around those spaces. We all know you don't need to audit your company in order to know that the end of year parties or where sexual harassment, sexual assault happen. You don't need to have a PhD in gender equity to know that clients who travel for work are more likely to experience sexual harassment when they're traveling for work. People who work late hours, people who work morning shifts, people who work on their own with clients. You don't need to audit your company in order to know those things. I've already given you 4 or 5, possibly more examples of places that you can make changes, where you can say, hey, you work on your own. Is there anything that you think that we could do better to help you feel safe? And it may be that they say, it would be really helpful to have a company phone for when I go on business, because that would then be logged and loaded with all of the people that I can contact, all of the people I could get in touch with, a panic button, whatever it is. Like, you could have a thing that works for your budget, a thing that works with a lot of your other processes and systems. There'll be loads of stuff that you already do, dear HR, that you can just apply to other parts of the business, that you can say, we've already got that software, we've already got that system, why don't we just add in this bit into it to create it. But I would say, if you don't know where to start and you want to start somewhere, anonymous reporting.
Mm-hmm. It feels like, the human part of human resources is missing.
Yeah.
It's like, it just feels like this cold area that people are afraid of going towards when they have an issue. And that might not even be harassment, any type of issue, because of the fear of the consequences, whatever those consequences are. I know you know quite a lot about the law and what your rights are. So can you just talk a little bit about that? Because it may seem obvious, but I certainly don't know what all my rights are, to be honest, when it comes to law. And I feel like, and I'm sure a lot of people feel like, the law is probably against us as well when it comes to certain things that you want to actually report.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting listening to some of the other episodes of your podcast regarding healthcare. One of the things that we see time and time again is, we feel afraid of going to the GP. We feel like we're going to get gaslit. We feel afraid of going to the police. We feel like we're going to get gaslit. We feel afraid of going to HR. We feel like we're going to get gaslit. And the same messages are occurring in all of those spaces. And yet all of the experts that you have on here say, I know that and I hear that, and yet I still want you to go. I still want you to go to the GP about your menstrual health. I still want you to go to the police about sexual harassment. I still want you to go to HR about this. And so I would say, in terms of knowing your rights, there are obviously the Equality Act, all of those things that I talked about at the start, the unwanted behaviour, whether they intended to or not, it made you feel naff. Go and speak to HR, go and get legal advice, speak to ACAS, report it to someone, and then see what happens. The likelihood of it being prosecuted doesn't need to cross your mind. Don't worry about that until after. There are lots of examples of people receiving sums of money. There are loads of examples of people receiving suspended sentences and similar. But I think we often jump ahead of ourselves when we think about what's going to happen. Don't worry about that. Just report it. Just go to the GP. Don't worry about all of the tests that are going to happen thereafter or the diagnoses that are going to come. Yeah. Similarly with HR, go in this case. There are a couple of things that are important to say when thinking about who this happens to. We've obviously covered the intersectional aspects. But one of the things that I think doesn't get covered in workplaces enough is coercive relationships, and where this happens in your relationships at home and your relationships with people that you may also work with, because there are plenty of people who work with people that they're married to or even have just had a one-night stand with. I have no embarrassment or shame. People do that all the time.
Yep.
And you still don't deserve to be sexually harassed by that person. Just because you've consented to having one night of sex or to be married to them does not mean that you consented to be degraded, to be intimidated, etc. So it's really important to say that this isn't just Jimmy from accounts that does this. So they're always in accounts when people give these examples, isn't it? Fine. Hypothetically, Jimmy from whoever, Sarah from wherever. It happens in that space all of the time, and there are all different laws for that. There are also different laws for things like upskirting. 2019, the law was passed on upskirting, people taking pictures of you without your consent. That's another important element of how this all plays out. And then also thinking about the kind of online safety bill element of this. As I said earlier, social media has become a real powerhouse for how we are engaging and enabling each other on this. But it's also a really clear place that it happens, anonymous trolls, etc. But also, importantly, in the workplace, Slack channels, Teams channels, people in group chats in the workplace. If you are in a group chat that is talking about your colleagues, rating your colleagues in terms of how attractive they are, today is the day you leave the group chat because it's sexual harassment. Leave the group chat because that is almost certainly unwanted behaviour for at least one person in that group chat. Yes, there may be some of your colleagues who are like, I love that you do that. I love that you rate us. And in most cases, that's because they're at the top of the rankings. But even, and I've seen cases where the person who's been, given the 10 out of 10 rated most likely to be really good in bed has been horribly uncomfortable about the fact that that's being talked about on a work channel whilst they're at work and they only know that person in a work context. So thinking about how it plays out in that case too, moving away from the idea that harassment is the really scary, overt screaming harassment or the like catcalls and wolf whistles in the street to it happens online, it happens to people in relationships, and then it happens to everyone irrespective of their identity, going back to those stats from earlier.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I think what will be really useful is, if anyone listening wants some more information, obviously they can have a look at your website and stuff, but also I will add in the show notes some organizations that they can go to for, advice, like you mentioned before, is it ACAS?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, they will be in the show notes and I will, put them through the social media as well, because ultimately, if you want to remain anonymous and you just want a bit of advice on which way to go, whether something's wrong or right, whatever that might be, speaking to someone can really lift a huge weight off your shoulder. Even just having that conversation can really help. And if you don't feel comfortable talking to your friends, family, or a colleague, then talking to a complete stranger might just do the trick, not just do the trick, sorry, that's the wrong way to put it, but might just help in some way, shape or form. So yeah. I will definitely add that in there. But Enya, thank you so much for being on the Empowered podcast. It's been I feel like, like I said, I have not had this kind of conversation on the podcast, and I'm so glad you reached out to me, actually. This is such a huge and important topic that doesn't really get talked about much. And also, in terms of reporting any form of harassment, I think it goes on in a lot of places and it's so unreported. So if this helps anyone through anything, even if it's one person, I'll be like, it will be just amazing. But yeah, no, honestly, thank you for being on the podcast. It's great to have on. And anyone listening, reach out to Enya. If you are in HR, please reach out to Enya. And, get some information if you need, a consultant to come in and help you with this, because it's so important, especially for your employees, to build that trust. Like you said, it starts with the trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And the kind of final plug, saying as we're here, is that I also offer free resources. So don't let budget be a reason that you don't do stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And those free resources will be in the show notes as well, of course. So have a look there, and it will be running through my socials too. And yeah, thank you so much for being on the Empowered podcast. It's been great to have you on. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Empower Her. I hope today's episode has left you feeling inspired and motivated to make a positive difference in your world. Please follow the podcast and share it with anyone who will find it helpful. Until next time, keep striving for positive change and greatness for all women.